I'm at the Georgia Museum of Agriculture. This is down in Tifton, Georgia, way down in South Georgia with Nats. And I'm at an old house that's on the museum grounds. And this old home, which is a very nice old home, and this would have been a fairly wealthy family, would have had a house this nice, as it turns out. It's probably from about 150 years ago, by the way. But this house has a feature that I remember seeing as a kid that I was just totally astounded by. You would see these on many, many old houses growing up here in South Georgia. And it's this concept of this thing called the traveler's porch. So the traveler's porch was usually in the front, but sometimes in the back, like this one. And it was a place that was somewhat separate from the house. There's a set of steps coming up right here that go straight into the porch, into the room. And it doesn't involve the rest of the house. So the living quarters would have been over here. And you would have had this traveler's porch that would have been accessible to the outside. And the idea was that this was an era when there were no hotels, there were no inns, places were few and far between, houses were spread apart many miles. There were no places for travelers to stay or strangers to stay. And so this concept of the traveler's porch came about. And so the idea was that if you'd been traveling all day, if you were a stranger going through Tifton, you could find a house with one of these porches, and you could just come up, and if it was empty, you could go in and stay at the room. There was no money, there were no questions asked. It was just this free gift. So this is a pretty nice room in a pretty nice home. Had a pretty nice bed, would have been a little lumpy by our standards, but pretty nice bed. The essential kerosene lantern, the essential chamber pot, maybe even a place to sit and write or to read. The reason this came to mind was one of the earliest influences in my life about giving, that influenced my feelings about giving were my parents, my mom and dad. And they were both Depression-era people. My dad especially, he grew up in the worst time of the Depression here in the South. My mother a little later than that. But they both would have certainly recognized a traveler's porch. It was such a common item in all these homes. And I just think that's so fascinating that at a time of just destitute, these were destitute times. These people were hungry a lot. My dad grew up hungry. But that nonetheless, this little custom endured, this custom of this traveler's porch. So my folks were open-handed givers, and that was a big influence on me. The second influence is from my wife Lori. When we first met years ago, I was probably being a little parsimonious on the church stewardship campaign, and she pulled me aside and reminded me and said, this is not your money. This is just something you've been entrusted with for, maybe 100 years if you're lucky. And this money is a tool. It can be used for good things, it can be used for frivolous things. But the sooner you get over thinking about it as being yours, the better off you'll be. So that was a bit of an epiphany. And it was freeing in a way. She was absolutely right. And so that's been kind of the other part of my journey, if you will. Seeing this graciousness that was evident in my parents, and then learning, kind of seeing that truly what this is just a thing you've been entrusted with. You're just a custodian of what you've got. And so that was a very freeing thought, and one that we both try to live by. I think both of those attitudes, that of the open-handed giving and that of the just considering your possessions are just things you're entrusted with. That's all. They aren't yours. So as we kind of go through the rest of the stewardship campaign, I just wanted to kind of at least let you know where I'd kind of come to the place that I am now. And as you consider these same sorts of questions for the stewardship campaign, I guess if nothing else, I'd ask you to think about the traveler's porch as you consider your times, gifts, and talents.